much, Dr. Sampath, and all of you with the Madras Development Society. I'm going to talk today about something that I've been involved in through the Trust Network. I will talk about initially some parallels between the United States and India. I will refer to some lessons from Sri Lanka, from the work that I did in Sri Lanka with the Asia Foundation. I'll talk about engaging in conflict early warning and early response in the United States, violence prevention versus interruption, some deficiencies that we found in the system that we use, and then finally some conclusions. And I'll try to keep this brief, around 15 minutes. Is that okay? Will that work time-wise?
Yes, yes. Pardon, sir?
Around 15 minutes, is that, will
Yes,
that work
yes,
okay?
15 minutes is okay. Please.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. First of all, parallels between the United States and India. It is internationally recognized that the United States now suffers from toxic polarization. Partisan politics have steadily evolved into very distinct opposing narratives, and conflict between the distinct identity groups escalates into violence, often tied to political events such as elections, rallies, and court rulings laden with racial overtones. Of course, India is facing similar polarization, fueled by religious nationalism and the struggle to attain and hold political power. Religion is arguably less of a factor in the United States, though our partisan divide also has religious dimensions. Both of our countries suffer from the propagation of hate via digital means. It is astonishing how rumors and outright lies can spread rapidly over social media. And the tendency seems to be that the more extreme they are, the more viral they become. Indeed, some social media platforms are designed to work that way. Lessons from Sri Lanka. I was first exposed to violence prevention at a local level when working with the Foundation for Coexistence in Sri Lanka as a consultant to the Asia Foundation. The Asia Foundation had a grant from the British High Commission in Colombo. Foundation for Coexistence, FCE, was the Asia Foundation's implementing partner, and I engaged in monitoring, evaluation, and report writing. I spent considerable time with FCE staff members, and they became some of my best teachers. FCE's approach was to train people in mediation at a local level. They also hired field monitors who were expected to submit a report daily about either conflict or cooperation. They were based in the contentious eastern province of Sri Lanka. Field monitors would also call FCE staff members in Colombo with a plea for top-level intervention if it appeared that conflict was escalating. Sometimes FCE made calls to senior officials. At other times, they relied on themselves and went to the location of potential violence to try to dissuade people from harming one another. FCE headquarters also compiled events data from numerous news sources in multiple languages. They had a verification team to check the veracity of news reports. Verified data were combined with data from field monitors, and trend analyses were performed for an indication of the general direction of tensions at an aggregate district level. At the same time, field members using inductive reasoning would sense that violence would soon erupt and would travel to those locations and negotiate solutions to reduce tensions. Okay, now I move to engaging in conflict early warning in the United States. In the months leading to the 2020 elections, it was clear that violence was likely in the United States. Due to that concern, the Trust Network was created. There are three entities in the Trust Network. First is Mediators Beyond Borders International, which has relationships with mediators around the world. Second is the National Association for Community Mediation, which is an umbrella organization of member community mediation centers, many of which were established as entity was a group of people with experience using information and communication technologies for humanitarian purposes. We created Election Incident Reporting USA, which after the election we renamed to Political Incident Reporting USA. We refer to ourselves as a group of digital nomads. Our idea was to engage mediators in hotspots throughout the United States. We use Zoom to engage in training and conflict early warning and early response. We built robust partnerships with organizations and individuals to enhance capacity for both warning and response. You can look at our website and see the partners that we work with, that we continue to work with. In terms of technologies, we started out using Ushahidi, a digital mapping platform developed in Nairobi, Kenya, and used throughout the world. We sought text messages about unfolding events and used Twilio for receiving and sending them. We linked Ushahidi and Twilio using an application programming interface, an API. In terms of the technologies, I've written elsewhere about other conflict early warning and early response approaches that involve disseminating a short code, urging people to send information if they spot something suspicious or concerning, otherwise known as crowdsourcing, while also training a group of people how to intervene, while also relying on them to send information on events of conflict and cooperation. This is a trust network as compared to a crowd. In this case, submissions of data from trust network members does not need to be verified, whereas crowdsourced data does. In the case of the trust network in 2020, we did not receive considerable text from trusted members who had been trained. We decided not to disseminate a short code to promote crowdsourcing because we lacked the human resources to go through the verification process. At the same time, we started using Slack, where we asked people to share information on unfolding events which they monitored using Twitter. We prioritized the cities where there were both an indication that tensions were rising, but also where there were organizations on the ground that had the ability and desire to respond if there was a warning. For each of these cities, we built lists of respected journalists and their Twitter handles. We also identified freelancing reporters, sometimes called night crawlers, and credible non-reporters whose tweets we had followed long enough for them to establish credibility. The people monitoring Twitter traffic we call media monitors. The media monitors were volunteers from all over the United States, but also in Scotland, Norway, Australia, and elsewhere. The ones who volunteered extensively became familiar with biases of the data sources, whether they were journalists, freelancers, or non-journalists. This assessment of bias was factored in cognitively by media monitors when aggregating data and triangulating events for verification. By cognitively, I mean that judgment calls had to be made and there was a procedural discipline that had to be maintained, such as not issuing a warning to groups in hotspot locations until triangulation was completed. This media monitoring and notification of people locally was labor intensive. Adding events to the digital map on the Ushahidi platform came to be seen as not useful for early warning purposes. It also took time to write up explanations that we were providing with each entry. Thus, the map was eventually abandoned as we concentrated on using Twitter for data and Slack for communication. Okay, now I'll cover violence prevention versus interruption. One of the confusing dimensions of our work was in clarifying that violence prevention can begin well before tensions escalate and violence is likely. In fact, it is far preferable to work towards dissipation of tensions early. There are some circumstances, however, where that was either not done or when there is abrupt escalation. In those cases, violence must be interrupted. We found that many of the staff of community mediation centers were interested in learning how to engage in interruption, but it was new to many of them. On the other hand, we found 3 organizations that were engaged in interruption regularly. The first is Cure Violence Global, based in Chicago. Their violence interruption approach hails from epidemiology. They have primarily sought to prevent gang violence, so their approach must be adapted to addressing violence driven by polarized politics or extremist groups, or both. The second is DC Peace Teams, which operates in Washington, DC, but has trained people in interruption in numerous locations, most recently over Zoom. The third is Nonviolent Peace Force, which is based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but has operations globally. When it comes to interruption, we found that another technology was needed, namely a secure text messaging platform. We started using Signal to communicate with members of DC Peace Teams and Nonviolent Peace Force. Our communications were not warnings per se. Instead, we provided information that enhanced their situational awareness. For example, on January 6, 2021, the day of the insurrection in Washington, DC, we were in contact with DC Peace Team members about movements of various groups, especially the so-called Proud Boys and Black Lives Matter protesters. We saw that these 2 groups were about to meet in a predictable location, and we urged DC Peace Team to try to change the trajectory of one of the groups. DC Peace Team was successful in doing so, and we assumed violence was therefore interrupted successfully. We had similar success elsewhere. Okay, so what are the deficiencies? We have spotted deficiencies in our media monitoring approach. First, people sending tweets do not always have their GIS feature turned on their phones, which makes it difficult to identify where they are located. We speculate that this problem can be partially solved by spotting buildings, monuments, and the like. Most of the tweets have images and video footage sent with brief explanations. We wonder if there is room for using artificial intelligence to assist in identifying locations of where images and video footage is taken, using pattern recognition, offering a location and confidence intervals. The second deficiency is our inability to monitor non-prioritized areas. We are skeptical about the use of artificial intelligence to mine huge volumes of data, but we are hopeful that algorithms can be sufficiently trained to identify signals of escalating tensions. This would be helpful in drawing our attention to non-prioritized locations, especially if there happens to be a local organization with the capacity and desire to engage in violence prevention. A third deficiency is the need for a dashboard to pull disparate information together while archiving it as time goes by. It might be possible to weigh tweets according to degrees of bias in one direction or the other, aggregate them, and plot location of escalating tensions. The dashboard could keep track of Twitter handles of credible sources by city, track them using parsing software, and aggregate with predetermined thresholds for warnings. It could also assist in disseminating warnings to people prepared to intervene to prevent violence in specific locations. The archive data could be used to spot lessons learned and also used for other research. In conclusion, both India and the United States are suffering from polarization, a proliferation of hate groups, digital hate communications, and associated violence. Our 2 countries could benefit from sharing lessons learned from our efforts to prevent violence in these polarized climates. There is also room for collaboration in developing algorithms that can help us detect signals of increasing tension. A good place to start is to work with Aggie, found at getaggie.org, an aggregation platform developed by Mike Best and his team at Georgia Tech. Finally, I challenge university faculty members to work together and students to work together to build a world-class dashboard as an open source product. Our understanding of the impact of social media on politics is in its infancy. And the regulation of social media by governments is just now getting traction. But I regret to say that we are going to be facing polarization and associated violence for the foreseeable future. Just imagine if Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels had Twitter at their disposal. It is a bleak picture, but please keep in mind that there are universities filled with faculty and students who are bright, who care, who are willing to work for a better world. We can do great things if we build networks of trust and goodwill globally. I invite you to join in this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. You've given a lot of picture about USA, international, India and USA, many other matters on peace and conflict resolution. It is new to us for many of the information. We all enjoyed about your presentation. We can collaborate in future for our university, for many of our peace initiative in India. Because of academic activities, very, very important to boost in India and other Asian countries. Western countries very much showing interest on peace and conflict resolution. I studied a short-term program in Ottawa in Canadian International Institute of Peace and Conflict Resolution. Similarly, I studied in Austrian Institute of Peace and Conflict Resolution, and I studied ISS, International Institute of Social Studies in Netherlands. All are peace and conflict. Not in India. India is not very much familiarized this program. But
also recently studied in Italy, Dr. Sampath.
Yes, Italy also I attended a refugee program. Not only that, now the Indian government and Indian courts are very much showing interest for the arbitration, mediation, and negotiation. And the peace building activities very, very less for a year. So your speech will be motivating a lot for us.
Before you go, Dr. Sampath, I want to add one point for Dr.
No.
I want to just congratulate Dr. Bock for accepting this prestigious second international award for Kennesaw State University School of Peace Building. That's very a noble gesture. And also, Professor pointed out that if a Twitter has been there for Goebbels and Hitler, we don't need that anymore. Now we have a Trump and Republican. Thank you.
Yes,
that's all.
Thank you, sir. Now I am requesting next speaker. We will give this award before calling next speaker. We will give this award in India or in USA. When I'm visiting, I will bring the entire award to organize a small function in your university, and we will present this award to your department.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I apologize ahead of time that I have another meeting that I'm going to have to go to, but I'm grateful to all of you, and I encourage you to keep working hard at this, and also consider applying for a Fulbright to come to our university and study with us. We would love that, and I'm grateful to all of you. Thank you very much.